So we're starting a new book, Exodus. It's a good one. And we've took 3 different sessions to study through Genesis, and recall that at the end of Genesis, Jacob, also known as Israel, had just died. His descendants had immigrated to Egypt before he did. And then if we look at the final 2 verses of Genesis, it recounts Joseph's deathbed request. So Joseph, his son that was saved everybody in Egypt, remember. Joseph said, he made this request. Then Joseph made these sons of Israel, that is, his brothers, swear an oath. And he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph then died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. That's where we left it. That's where the author left it. And now we're going to go into Exodus, starting in verse 1.
Got here just in time.
Just in time.
These are the names of the sons of Israel. Okay. These are the names of the sons of Israel, that is Jacob, who moved to Egypt with their father, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In all, Jacob had 70 descendants in Egypt, including Joseph, who was already there. In time, Joseph and all of his brothers died, ending that entire generation. But their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful and filled the land. Eventually, a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country." So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives. Why have you done this? He demanded. Why have you allowed the boys to live? The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, the midwives replied. They are more vigorous and have their babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time. So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply, growing more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: "Throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live."
Wow. Okay, so it reminds me of this. I heard this once. What is the opposite of fragile? You might think it's like very strong. The opposite of fragile is more than that. It's anti-fragile, which means the more you oppress or beat it or do things that would make it break, the stronger it gets. It's even more than just being strong. It gets stronger. Like a good example is if you walk enough, then your bones stay full of calcium because they need that feeling of pounding a little bit to be able to grow well. Yeah. Or when you have a broken bone, I know this from experience with broken legs, if the bones will heal better if they feel pressure, because that signals hormones to tell the bones to grow together and sends out little growth cells that make them join. Anyway, that's what seemed to be happening to the Israelites. To me, they were the more they were oppressed, the stronger they got. So let's go through all these verses, though. That just occurred to me while Ida was reading that. So, while Joseph served Pharaoh there, the Egyptians respected his family, continued honoring them after his death. We knew that from Genesis. That Pharaoh loved the family. I mean, he and Jacob got along really well. Well, God kept his promise to Abraham because what did God promise Abraham? There'd be more descendants than the stars in the sky or the grains of sand on the beach. And the population grew, according to the Bible, to about 600 men. Now, if you add in the women and children, we're probably estimating about 2 million, all descended from Jacob, that new Pharaoh. Then this new guy, generations later, feared them and acted upon it. So he took some steps that he thought were going to fix the problem. And they were, uh, let's see, if I've got this right. Yes. I'm not sure I've got this. Yes, this is it. He took steps to try to get rid of them, and none of them worked. Step one was afflicting the adults. So God foretold Abraham's descendants. Let me start that over. God told Abraham that his descendants would be enslaved, but later freed. In Egypt was like a furnace refining his people. Though Israel had blessed Egypt, without Joseph, Egypt would really have suffered. And then God blessed Egypt because the Israelites were there. So they benefited, but Pharaoh didn't see it that way. He was afraid that they were eventually going to overwhelm Egypt. Few have suffered like the Hebrews or the Jews, but God judges their persecutors. From Pharaoh to Stalin, he persecutes them. God watches patiently, but judges in time. That's one message for us. God's justice will occur eventually. Might not be in this life, but it will happen. So that's step one. Step two, Pharaoh tried, was killing the Jewish boys at birth. Now, if he succeeded in this, then he would have destroyed the Hebrews, because then there wouldn't be any descendants. And so God used those Jewish midwives to resist. Speaking of the midwives, they're pretty. My daughter Deanna took a course in ethics when she was in school, and it was biblical based ethics. And one of the question was, is it ever okay to lie? And this is the classic example of where these midwives lied, right? They told that the problem was that the women were so strong they couldn't get to them, capable, they couldn't get to them in time. That wasn't the reason. It's because midwives were not killing them. And the idea is that in rare circumstances it is okay to lie if that's a lesser of evils. But in general, it's good. It's best not to lie. There have to be, maybe that's the exception that proves the rule for that. So they killed. Second thing he did was kill the Jewish boys. The third one is the drowning of the male babies. All right. So when Pharaoh discovered he'd been deceived and those babies were still being born, he said, "Well, I'm still going to get them. I'm going to order the Hebrews all to drown their newborn males." And he told the Egyptians who were their overlords that if they saw any little babies that were boys, then they needed to report that to him. So those were his attempts. They didn't work. And next we go to that pretty much gets us through everything Ida's read, the first chapter. Any comments on that first chapter before we move on?
Was everybody either a Jew or Gentile, or how many different nationalities, or how many different types of people did they have over there at that time?
Oh, well,
I mean,
they didn't
it's
have
not the melting
Jews.
pot that it is today, but
No. They had a lot of different nations, and Egypt was its nation, and then was this not a nation yet thing we call the Israelites. Okay, until
right.
they escaped from there, right? But then up in Canaan, we know there were the Amorites, the Jebusites, the all of
Okay.
up in Canaan, because they're going to go and face all that, and God's going to promise that they will. You'll see in the next chapter. But at this point, there there wasn't a Jewish nation. There were the descendants of Israel, and who was Jacob.
Right.
Uh, technically, Jews are descendants of Judah, because they started calling them Jews when they were in the southern kingdom, which was the kingdom of Judah, with Simeon thrown in there because they kind of got mixed in with them. But then now we call all of them Jews. It just kind of stuck to become the name for everybody. The northern kingdom didn't exist, so all they had were
Right.
with Judah. But then when they came back, and the book of Chronicles makes us a point to point this out, that the people, when they returned from Babylon, there were representatives of all the tribes who came back
Right.
to Jerusalem to emphasize how now it was a rejoining of all of Israel. But that's off topic. But yeah, at this point there
I
wasn't
didn't
enough.
mean to get you off balance,
No,
but at least
that's a good question. Yeah.
there was all kinds of people. There wasn't just one or two kinds of people. There was
No, I mean in Genesis we also have the lineage of the sons of Noah, because everybody was wiped out before Noah, so it restarted with Noah.
right.
And his sons repopulated the earth, and there were Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And
That's
some
right.
Ham was the one who was his bad son, and the Canaanites were descendants of him. So that's how that worked.
Okay.
And
Thank
so
you.
yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, let's move on then. I had to start reading chapter 2 here, first 10 verses.
About this time, a man and woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son.
Oh.
She saw that he was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. Baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the river bank. While the princess saw the basket among the When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Oh, yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess told the baby's mother. "I will pay you for your help." So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses, for she exclaimed, "I lifted him out of the water."
Okay, so Moses' parents, we'll find out later in the book of Exodus, were named Amram and Jochebed. Exodus emphasizes Jochebed's faith. Hebrews, in that chapter 11, emphasizes both of them and honors both of them as great heroes of faith. Moses grew in faith under his devout parents. So that was some awesome training right there. He grew up in his early life through his devout parents who already had Miriam and Aaron. So what did they do? As Ida read, they hid him, and despite the danger, and Jochebed trusted God, placing Moses in the Nile River. And then the princess, seeing and hearing that child, rescued him. She adopted Moses and gave him elite training. God has a plan. In Egyptian, Moses means born or son, and sounds like the Hebrew word for to draw out. So it had two meanings: son and to draw out of the water, depending on the language. His name then reminded him of God's rescue. Anytime you think of his name, it's drawn out of son, drawn out of water. And indeed, he was going to later deliver his people with that same trust in God that he could have just by thinking about his name. Let's read the next set of verses. Sorry, here we go.
Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, "Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday? Then Moses was afraid, thinking everyone knows what I did. And sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, who came as usual to draw water and fill the water troughs for their father's flocks. But some other shepherds came and chased them away. So Moses jumped up and rescued the girls from the shepherds. Then he drew water for their flocks. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds," they answered. "And then he drew water for us and watered our flocks." "Then where is he?" their father asked. "Why did you leave him there? Invite him to come and eat with us." Moses accepted the invitation and settled there with him. In time, Reuel gave Moses his daughter Zipporah to be his wife. Later, she gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, for he explained, "I have been a foreigner in a foreign land." Years passed, and the king of Egypt died, but the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel and knew it was time to act.
Well, this thought occurred to me while you were reading. Seems like in the Bible, a good place to go meet women is at a well. Yeah, the woman at the well, and then there's this one, this where he met all the daughters, and then the who is it? Isaac's aunt, both Isaac and I think Jacob met their wives to be at wells. So okay, so Moses, he was there 40 years in Egypt, learning, getting educated. And what things did happen there? Well, we already mentioned that he got his theological training, you could say, from his parents. He got his education though there in Egypt. God was preparing him through knowledge and speech, essentially leadership training. That's what someone who's the Pharaoh's daughter's and the princess's son would learn. Then he learned through failure. Moses knew he was a Hebrew, and so he chose to help his people and may have saved that Hebrew's life there. But others knew he had killed the Egyptian. Of course, so as Ida said, he had to flee. Well, in that show, Moses was a compassionate man, but impulsive. Yet he learned from this failure because later he would be called more humble than any other person. His failure here must have just crushed him. So God sent him off to Midian to recover. He went there to tend sheep and to learn dependence. So that was a good thing to learn. And then he spent time in solitude and humble service. He fled to the land of the Midianites. Now, Midianites, they were descendants of Abraham through his second wife, Keturah. I don't know if you remember, but you think of Abraham being married to Sarah. End of story. But there's actually at the end of the chapters on talking about Abraham, it says that after Sarah died, he married other women, and one of them was Keturah. So this descendant of Abraham and Keturah was a Midianite. and his name was Reuel. And so Abraham helped his daughters, eventually married one of them, Zipporah, and had 2 sons. Reuel also was known as more, I think of him more as Jethro myself, but he also had, so he had two names you'll see in the Bible. Once mighty in Egypt, this guy, Moses, was now caring for sheep, caring for stubborn sheep. Israel was God's flock. Moses became Israel's shepherd. So he needed that training of to take care of stubborn sheep, because he was going to be taking care of stubborn sheep his whole life. His 40 years of shepherding thus shaped him, made him, gave him the kind of maybe humbleness and ability to deal with stubborn things, whether it's an animal or a person. And Wiersbe points out that a takeaway from this is that God doesn't lay hands on us suddenly, but he takes time to first equip us for the work he wants us to do. So God's delays aren't evidence of unconcern for, as for the Israelites. He hears our groans, he sees our plight, he feels our sorrows, and he remembers his covenant. When the right time comes and he's prepared us for what he wants us to do, he can come immediately and go to work. It's what we're going to see next. This is chapter 3, verses 1 through 4 through 4:17. So get ready here. One thing I want y'all to try to do is, if you get something new out of this that you hadn't gotten all the many times you've probably listened to or heard sermons on these verses or read through in the Bible, there's some new insight. You might write it down so we can talk about it. Sorry. Go ahead.
One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. "This is amazing," Moses said to himself. "Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it." When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the Lord, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, "I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt." But Moses protested to God, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt?" God answered, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. But Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. Now go and call together all the elders of Israel. Tell them Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me. He told me, I have been watching closely, and I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I have promised to rescue you from your oppression in Egypt. I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. The elders of Israel will accept your message. Then you and the elders must go to the king of Egypt and tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go, and I will cause the Egyptians to look favorably on you. They will give you gifts when you go, so you will not leave empty-handed. Every Israelite woman will ask for articles of silver and gold and fine clothing from the Egyptian neighbors and from the foreign women in their houses. You will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. But Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? Then the Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down on the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. Perform this sign, the Lord told him. Then they will believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob really has appeared to you. Then the Lord said to Moses, now put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out again, his hand was white as snow, with a severe skin disease. Now put your hand back into your cloak, the Lord said. So Moses put his hand back in, and when he took it out again, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. The Lord said to Moses, if they do not believe you and are not convinced by the first miraculous sign, they will be convinced by the second sign. And if they don't believe you or listen to you even after these 2 signs, then take some water from the Nile River and pour it out on the dry ground. When you do, the water from the Nile will turn to blood on the ground. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now, even though you have spoken to me. I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. Then the Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. But Moses again pleaded, Lord, please send someone else. Then the Lord became angry with Moses. All right, he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks well, And look, he is on his way to meet you now. He will be delighted to see you. Talk to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people. He will be your mouthpiece, and you will stand in the place of God for him, telling him what to say. And take your shepherd's staff with you and use it to perform the miraculous signs I have shown you.
Okay. So God calls busy people. Gideon was at that threshing, was out threshing grain. Samuel was serving in the tabernacle. David was caring for sheep. Elijah was out there plowing. The 4 apostles were managing their fishing business. And Matthew was out collecting taxes. So he calls us even when we're busy. Get over it. It happens. So what did Moses see? God can take an insignificant bush, ignite it, and turn it into a miracle. And that's what he wanted to do with Moses. See, the burning bush was a picture of what God had planned for Moses himself. Moses was this weak bush, but God was an empowering fire, and the empowering fire inside that bush. And with his help, Moses could accomplish anything. What did Moses hear? God spoke to Moses and assured him he was the God of his fathers and that he felt the suffering of the Jews in Egypt. God's statement, behold, I will send you, must have astonished him. Why would God choose this failure? So what did Moses do? Well, instead of rejoicing, Moses resisted with excuses. In Egypt, think back 40 years ago, Moses was this impetuous horse, but now 40 years later, he'd become this stubborn mule, resisting God. He gave 5 excuses. First one was, I'm a nobody. God responded by saying, I will be with you. The second one's, I don't know your name. God revealed it. Was Jehovah. I am the eternal, faithful God. Jesus later said, I am the bread of life. God's name, Jehovah or Yahweh, had been known to the patriarchs. So it was known before he told it to Moses, but he never brought it as explicitly as I am. God told Moses exactly what would happen when he returned to Egypt. Israel would follow him. Pharaoh would resist. The Lord would deliver Israel. And Israel would take with him spoils from the Egyptian. In this way, by giving them those spoils from Egypt, God provided them with wages they hadn't received as slaves. So all those years from slavery, they're getting some payback for it. Third thing is, his third excuse was, the elders, they won't believe me. So God said, all right. I give you these 3 signs to confirm that I am behind you. Then he's getting, his excuses are getting flimsier. He's saying, I'm not a fluent speaker. Moses completely missed the message of what God's name and miraculous power meant. The great I am is all we need in every life circumstances, and it's foolish for us to argue, I am not. God could enable Moses to speak with power. Moses made the mistake of looking at himself instead of looking at God in him. The God who made us can use the abilities he's given us to accomplish the task he's assigned. to us. Moses was manifesting in what? And was it an attitude of pride or humility? He said, I'm this humble guy. Well, 40 years before, he felt perfectly adequate to face the enemy and act on behalf of his people, killed a man for it. Now he's backing off and says, I'm a worthless failure. You're calling me? And I love this from Wiersbe. Humility is not thinking poorly of ourselves. That's not humility. Humility is not thinking of ourselves at all and making God everything. Moses was clothing his pride and unbelief in a hollow confession of weakness. Then his fifth one wasn't an excuse. It just said, it's got to be somebody else who can do this better. Lord, please send anyone else. Moses calls him Lord, yet refuses to obey him. Most of us have probably made the same mistake. So God appointed Aaron to be Moses' spokesperson. Shows just how patient God is. I mean, he was getting impatient with Moses. Yet, subsequent events proved that Moses was very capable of speaking God's words with mighty power, both to his people and to the king of Egypt. As history unfolds, we find that Moses delivered some very eloquent messages. In fact, the book of Deuteronomy records a magnificent farewell speech he made. The lesson for us is that God knows us better than we know ourselves. So we must trust and obey him. When we tell God our weaknesses, we aren't sharing anything new with God. He doesn't already know. We're not sharing anything with God that he doesn't already know. The will of God will never lead us where the power of God can't enable us. So we, with that knowledge, we're calling him Lord, we can confidently walk by faith in his promises, no matter where he sends us. Speaking of sending, the last section here is the deliverer sent. And we'll read these verses and I'll try to speed things up a little bit here.
So Moses went back home to Jethro, his father-in-law. Please let me return to my relatives in Egypt, Moses said. I don't even know if they are still alive. Go in peace, Jethro replied. Before Moses left Midian, the Lord said to him, return to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you have died. So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and headed back to the land of Egypt. In his hand he carried the staff of God. And the Lord told Moses, when you arrive back in Egypt, go to Pharaoh and perform all the miracles I have empowered you to do. But I will harden his heart, so he will refuse to let the people go. Then you will tell him, this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son. I commanded you, let my son go so he can worship me. But since you have refused, I will now kill your firstborn son. On the way to Egypt, at the place where Moses and his family had stopped for the night, the Lord confronted him and was about to kill him. But Moses' wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised her son. She touched his feet with the foreskin and said, now you are a bridegroom of blood to me. When she said a bridegroom of blood, she was referring to the circumcision. After that, the Lord left him alone. Now the Lord had said to Aaron, go out into the wilderness to meet Moses. So Aaron went and met Moses at the mountain of God, and he embraced him. Moses then told Aaron everything the Lord had commanded him to say, and he told him about the miraculous signs the Lord had commanded him to perform. Then Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt and called all the elders of Israel together. Aaron told them everything the Lord had told Moses, and Moses performed the miraculous signs as they watched. Then the people of Israel were convinced that the Lord had sent Moses and Aaron. When they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped.
Good ending there. It is difficult to suddenly pick up, and we've lived in a place for 40 years. The text describes 5 encouragements that God gave Moses to help him, through that time. The first thing he did was gave him the sign, and the encouragement was his father-in-law's blessing. So Moses wouldn't have left without his father-in-law's permission and blessing, or he'd been in a real conundrum. However, there's no record that Moses has really told Jethro what he's really going to do. He just said he was going to go visit his family and see if they were still alive. The second were the promises of God. As Moses stepped out in faith, God spoke to and encouraged him. God told Moses not to be afraid to return to Egypt because his enemies were dead. Then he assured Moses that he would enable him to do these miraculous signs. He even gave him how it was all going to play out. Pharaoh was going to harden his heart and invite more judgments from the Lord. But before Moses even arrived in Egypt, he knew he had a battle in his hands, but he knew how it was going to end, that he was going to be victorious. God also assured Moses of his special love for Israel. He was going to redeem Israel, his firstborn, while slaying the firstborn of Egypt. He was reminding Moses that he was the servant of a great God, the great God. A third, Wiersbe pulls this out of that strange event with the circumcision, was Zipporah's obedience. That was a sign of encouragement. So what Wiersbe think happened to cause this was that Moses was probably influenced by Zipporah and had decided not to circumcise his second son, Eliezer. Thus, God was going to strike him down with a deadly illness until he fixed it. Moses couldn't have led the people of Israel if he'd not obeyed one of the fundamental commandments of the Lord, which is circumcision. And people were circumcising before God gave the 10 Commandments. That was a covenant that Abraham was supposed to always keep with God. That's his part of that Abrahamic covenant and onward. The fourth encouragement was Aaron's arrival at Horeb, another name for Mount Sinai. So there he's back where that burning bush was. He reunited with Aaron. Despite his imperfections, we know later Aaron wasn't perfect. He was a very effective minister alongside Moses and became the founder of the priesthood. So that was an encouragement. And then the final one was the nation's faith there at the end. Moses had expressed fear that the Jewish elders wouldn't believe his message or accept his leadership, but they did. And so would the rest of Egypt when they saw God's power in the signs. They bowed in grateful worship when they heard God would rescue them. Wow. Well, it ends, this chapter 4 really ends on a high note there. Abraham's there. He's got the backing of the people. He's going forward. He's got God, fire in his weak burning bush. But it was the lull before the storm. God was about to declare war on Egypt and Pharaoh, and the life for all the Jews there would become much more difficult before it got better. But that's for next week. In summary, in this lesson, we learned how Pharaoh's persecution of the Israelites created the need for a deliverer, how Moses, the deliverer, was born, how God prepared his deliverer through early childhood theological training from his parents, through Egyptian education, through life-changing failure, and then with humble service as a shepherd, and then how God called that deliverer from a burning bush and sent him to deliver Israel. Next week, we will cover the plagues and Pharaoh's stubbornness, and that's going to be in chapter 2 of the book. Okay, I will stop the share. And we have less time than that, I hope. But what, anybody jot down anything? Or mentally that they new insights?
Ironically, today we had a devotional on trust. And while you were reading part of that Exodus passage, it just reminded me of what was discussed of our trust with God and trust with people and everything that we had here in the unit and outside our units and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Moses was trusting God at the beginning there?
How
No.
how we're capable of allowing people to be trustworthy is one of the hardest things to
Mm,
do.
yeah. Huh. Allowing people to be trustworthy. I like that. Okay. Any others?
This is kind of a silly aside, but every time I have read that story about God telling Moses to throw his staff down, it turns into a snake, and then he picks it up. I think, oh. But when I was 3 and 4 years old, my mom and I lived with my grandparents on their farm outside of Yoakum during World War II while my dad was gone, and my grandfather and I were walking through the woods one evening, and that's what he did. We encountered a big copperhead. He picked it up. I guess this is old-fashioned things that people learned when we don't learn these things anymore. But he picked it up by the tail and popped it just like you would a uh, a uh, a oh, I'm
Or
a,
something?
a whip. Yeah, he popped his head off, and that was the end of that snake. And I thought, my goodness! But every time I see that story, that's what I think of because that made an impression on me. I still remember it.
My dad,
Wow.
dad did that.
Did he do that too?
Did well. He, back when they were growing up, they had turkeys roamed, and he went and found the turkeys all the time. So he was all through the pasture, but it just scared me to death. I was little, and
Yeah,
he picked up that, swung it around, and then popped it.
yeah.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
That's a
Oh.
lost story, isn't it?
Oh.
I've got probably some good snake stories. I just got one, but
Well,
I've got
Just
Shirley. Yeah.
with the 11
Go ahead.
rattles,
Yeah. Oh,
I
what?
think.
11 rattles.
Yeah, the rattlesnake.
We found a rattlesnake with 11 rattles.
It was just right outside the garage.
can't hear it.
Thank God I heard it.
Oh,
Right outside the garage.
Well, we could talk about snakes for a while, but I know
It's impressive.
if we talk long enough, people will start wanting to have some fried rattlesnake before they're hungry. Why don't we, one more comment and we'll close. Well, I really love that thing Wearsby brought out about how Moses was the bush
Yes.
and the fire coming into that bush was
Mhm.
God's Holy Spirit. You know, just
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, well, I will stop the recording and we'll close.